Welcome everyone. It's just past 12 noon here in Peterborough, Ontario, and we're about to get going. My name is Catherine Carlton. I'm Executive Director of Orchestras Canada, Orchestra Canada, and as I mentioned, I'm speaking to you today from my home in Peterborough, Nogajiwanong, the place at the end of the rapids in East Central Ontario. It is my profound privilege to live and work on this land covered by the Williams Treaty, Treaty 20, and the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe people. May we honor their teachings and their long stewardship of the land that we enjoy so much. Our gratitude goes to them. Now, I'm really excited today to introduce what is the fifth in our series in the Festival of Learning, focusing on digital tactics for smaller budget groups. This entire series, both the consultations that led into it and the Festival of Learning itself, are generously funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and we are very grateful for the Trillium Foundation's confidence in Ontario's smaller budget orchestras and their belief that Orchestras Canada was well positioned to help. I'm especially excited about this particular session because it's about digital tactics. It's not about high-flown strategy. It's about how to actually get the work done, and a little bit about how and why. And I'm completely delighted to welcome today's speaker. Well, I'll actually pass that one over to Lauren, who will do the deed. But it's so great that we have an opportunity for people who are working as experts in orchestras across the country to provide guidance and support and insight. And it's just a big thrill to see Alex Clark from the Vancouver Symphony joining us today to share just a little bit of what he knows. Lauren, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Drew, Director of Member Services and Learning for OC. I'm also very grateful to be joining from Nogajiwanong, Peterborough, on the treaty and traditional territory of Mississauga Anishinaabe. I've grown up and been shaped by these lands, and I'm very grateful for the stewardship of First Peoples in this area. So something you'll notice is we're doing visual descriptions of ourselves and our surroundings. You've noticed in the chat maybe that I've placed some explanation of that. It's to help with accessibility for folks who are blind or low vision. So with that, a visual description of myself. I have long dark brown hair. I'm wearing a dark green sweater. And behind me is a white wall with a green Trent University degree and a poster of the ferry and bridge at Trent University, which goes over a river. So I'll just ask Alex to advance to the next slide, and we'll do a little bit of tech notes. So first, you'll notice that in the chat, I've pasted instructions to enable live closed captioning. So you can turn that on and have some captions at the bottom as we're going through. Please keep your video and audio muted throughout the session. We are recording this, and you will receive the recording later, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint and some of the documents that Alex is referencing in his presentation. Be sure to type your questions for Alex in the chat. We'll have some time for Q&A near the end, and potentially also throughout. So type your questions in there, and we'll try to get to them. And again, we'll send the PowerPoint and any other resources, as well as the recording, to you via email in the coming weeks. So with that, I will hand it over to Alex, our wonderful presenter, and look forward to hear what he says.
Hello, everybody. It's very nice to join you from Vancouver today. This is just a little bit about me. That's a picture of me on the right. I've got slightly longer hair now, but I'm here from Vancouver. As you can see behind me, it says VSO. That's the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. I'm in our boardroom right now. And this is where I'm presenting from. This is a little bit about me personally. In the last since the COVID year started, or the COVID season started, my role at the Vancouver Symphony was the video director and associate producer. I've continued on with those duties, but I'm also still the assistant librarian and artistic associate at the Vancouver Symphony. Before that, I was in Kitchener as the librarian. Megan McCracken replaced me there and is still there doing a wonderful job. Before that, I played the viola and did a composition degree at Wilfrid Laurier University. Sometime in the last few years, I've also founded my own company called AseosA Productions, and this is a company that I use to to do all kinds of different concert production things, especially to do with digital video and audio aspects of usually classical music production. So I'm coming to you today from Vancouver, which I would like to acknowledge that I work, teach, play, and live on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And this is where the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra plays on these lands as well. So just going to jump right into this here. This is what we're going to talk about today. And we've got a few polls for you throughout the presentation. So we'll get that first one up right now. This first poll is just asking you if you have tried anything digital so far. Seeing some answers coming in already. So today what we're going to talk about a little bit is within the context of digital artistic productions, how can we consider things like budget, planning, expectations, preparation, copyright, and all of those things, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. And if there's time at the end, I'm sure there will be because we're planning for there to be. I'll give you a demonstration of how I prepare a video score and how that looks when it comes out in a video format. This is not just about creating a video score or creating video. Digital can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and a lot of different organizations. So we'll touch on that, and we'll hear a little bit more about it from you as well, I think, with some of these polls. So Lauren, have we finished? The poll has ended, it says. So it looks like, yeah, 90% of you have indeed done something digital during the pandemic, which is interesting, and probably maybe a bit skewed based on the fact that you're coming to this presentation today to talk more about digital. But there are also people who are working on it and or have not done something digital, and that's encouraging. Maybe this will be able to help you move in that direction if you'd like to. So yeah, let's just move on to the first slide here. Where should my mouse go? Keep losing it. Yeah, so we're going to talk about budgeting. So generally at this stage of the game, we're not talking about making money. So this is always one of the first questions about if we do digital, will this make us money? And there are lots of companies out there who have very successful for-profit models, and you'll hear about them because they make pop music videos or they feature films. All of these things count as digital. But at this time, even the biggest and most successful orchestras who are doing digital things, some of the big five in the United States or Berlin Philharmonic, these orchestras, they don't always make a profit on what they do, and they're funded quite well, and so they're not doing that just to make the money. They're doing this because digital is sort of a new thing that we can do in this century that we haven't been able to do before, and it also is a nice way of bringing an orchestra to a bigger audience, which is sort of one of the reasons that we like to do music in the first place, is to bring it to an audience. So one thing that you can do to sort of limit your budgeting is use the equipment that you already have, and that might be just like using an iPhone that you've got in your pocket already. So it could be that. It could be repurposing lights or something to make to improve your lighting in the situation that you're in. It could be using microphones that you would normally use on the stage if you're making an interview or something. So I'll talk a little bit more about the understanding of your tech in the demonstration before we finish this presentation. But before you go out and buy a bunch of new stuff, see what you can do with the existing equipment in the hall or in your personal possession. This is the iPhone thing I'm talking about. Also, there's strategic investments that you can make. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of interviews, it's probably a good idea to have a camera or two. It's probably a good idea to have lapel mics. It's probably a good idea to have lighting. Lighting is actually almost more important than the camera that you buy. If you don't have a well-lit subject, it's not going to look good even on a very, very good camera. So don't think you have to spend all your money on a camera and then don't spend any money on lighting. Spend a little bit on lighting as well, so that you've got a well-lit subject for your interview or for yours for the stage, for the musicians on the stage. And then there's a lot of rental companies that have bundles that you can rent for specific projects. Especially in the last couple of years, we've really seen rental companies that that understand what the needs are of a performance like this, like an orchestra performance. So renting a bundle, or getting a company to come in and do the work for you, it can actually sometimes be cheaper than just going out and investing in 10 cameras and 15 microphones and $30,000 worth of lighting or something like that. So yeah, consider just hiring out a digital production company if you don't have the expertise yourself. Companies that do this are happy to provide quotes which fit nicely into budgets, which can be part of the grant application. So this fits into sort of longer term thinking. We all know grant applications take longer than we'd like sometimes. So backing up to the budget, backing up even further to your quote from a company, that can take a lot of stress off of the administration and whoever's in charge of making those decisions. So keeping that in mind is a nice thing at the early stages of your planning. Understanding your technology and its limitations is important as well. So knowing what's possible and what's going to look good and what it's going to sound like is very important. So hiring the right people to produce, edit, assemble a show, that makes a difference sometimes between success and failure entirely. So having people who have never done it before, or hiring a video director who doesn't know how to read music, can be perhaps detrimental to your endeavor. So thinking about who to hire and how that works, and making sure that it's somebody who's done this kind of thing before can be a big difference. And there's a lot of people. I know a lot of us are in Ontario. There's a lot of people in Ontario who do that these days. So just talk to each other and figure out where, look around and see who's got some interesting things going on, and ask them who they hired and where they got those people. And maybe you can do it all yourself. That's great. A lot of orchestras are trying to do it all themselves, and there are varying levels of success and failure there. So consider doing it yourself, but also consider who you might bring on board. And we have to think about some other costs that you might not be thinking about in the early stages. Some things you have to think about: music licensing. Even if you're playing rental music, that's not public domain music, then you'll have to get a sync license for that performance as well. You may also have to pay a buyout to your musicians. Mostly make sure that everyone is aware in advance that you're doing these things, because if you're not having these conversations when you get to the last minute and you tell everybody that you're recording something, there might be surprises, and surprises are expensive. So be careful about that. Other costs there's a lot of other costs to consider when you're creating a digital show or digital concepts. Let's move on to some planning considerations. So this is when you're thinking about what can you do yourself. This is once you understand what equipment you have, what the capabilities of your team, and maybe the team is just you. Decide if it's possible to do it all yourself, or if you need to hire out a company to do a show/recording. You will likely need an audio engineer, a video director, editors for audio and video, as well as technicians to run the equipment. It's usually a good idea to have an audio and video technicians as separate people. Not asking everybody to do everything is probably a strong way to success. Sometimes you might get into a hall and they might say our audio and video person is very capable, and as long as they are communicating that and are prepared to do everything that you're asking for, then that's fine. But it's generally a good idea to have an audio team and a video team if you're recording a show for a live stream or for recording for later release. We've got to consider union involvement. Are your musicians part of the union? I hope so. Usually they should be. So you should check what recent clauses have been added to these contracts and the agreements. In 2020, a lot changed. A lot changed for digital, but it's very reasonable, and it can be planned out very well in advance, and it's not going to be a gigantic cost, but it's something to be aware of for sure. Are you in a union hall? I had the pleasure of working with a couple of orchestras this summer on some digital projects in Ontario. One of them was in a union hall and the other one wasn't. So I got to sort of see how those two differences worked out. At the VSO, we play out of a union hall, and so we have IATSE union covering all the positions that we have. And so make sure you're aware of who you need to hire to be in the hall. You might bring in 3 video people and 3 audio people, and you will likely need to shadow at least 4 of these positions, maybe all 6. When I say bringing in audio people and video people, what I mean is that you're probably going to bring in your own director. That might be you. You might bring in a couple of camera operators, and you might bring in somebody who wants to run the video equipment. The hesitation there is that if you're in a union hall, there are probably people involved in those positions already. So if you are bringing in camera operators and someone to operate the video switcher, you're paying for that person, but you're also paying for their shadow. So it would be better if you can just work well with the guys who are already in the hall. Having shadows is fine, but having competent people that you know you can work with and that you have enough time to get to know is really, really good too. If you're bringing in a director, you won't need a shadow for that, most likely. That's not a position that is covered under the IATSE agreements usually, but someone operating a camera, that is. So even if you bring in a company to run 3 cameras or something, those 3 camera operators will likely need to be shadowed by an IATSE person. So just keep in mind how many people you're going to need and ask lots of questions in advance so that you can plan for that and budget for it. Preparing materials is important too. It's just as important for the AV team to have rehearsal time as it is for the musicians, especially time to prepare the scores, which we'll look at a little bit later in this presentation. But also to practice the moves, practice the changes, the slides that they have to add, or whatever else it might be. You want to make sure that it's not the first day. The performance day is not the first day for these people, because having time to prepare and then practice is just as important for them, in my opinion. And then post-production, don't forget about editing costs. So this is something that maybe you can do yourself again, but it's nice to have somebody outside on the other side of the team to be doing editing as well, and that can be expensive too. So get a quote for that as well. The one thing I'll say about editing for audio and video at this point in the presentation is that simple and cheaper is sometimes better, because the more minute details that you're doing, the longer it's going to take the editor. The more overdubs that you have to do, the more retakes you have to do, the more expensive it's going to be, just because of timing. So considering post-production in your planning is important as well. Most of this is just knowing about what you're going to do and who's going to do it and how long it's going to take, and then you can budget for everything quite nicely. Let's move into the expectations portion, and maybe Lauren, this would be a good time to set up the second poll. So this poll is asking, what do you see as 3 opportunities for your orchestra in understanding a digital artistic project? So there's lots of options. Yeah, thank you for whoever started it off here. Let's see if we get a few more answers. I'm very curious about this myself. And as you're looking at this poll, here's some things to think about for expectations. Again, will this make us money? Probably not. But it should be very clear to every interested party that the intention is not to leverage digital to get out of a financial hardship situation. It's an additive artistic endeavor. It's something that you do because it's art. It's something that you do because it's informative. It's something that you do because it enhances a performance. It shouldn't necessarily be the most important part of the performance. The music is still the most important part, but the production, the digital production, might be a way that the music can live longer or exist after the fact. So digital means different things to different organizations, to different people, to different musicians. Perhaps it means having a pre-show slide playing on screens in the house. That's fairly straightforward. It involves PowerPoint and a computer and a projector and screens. Someone's got to operate that though, and somebody's got to create it and everything else. And that might not be something that you've done before, and it might be something that you want to add. And it's a great way to sort of get your foot in the door with digital. Maybe it's live streaming a concert with a single camera or a multi-camera setup and a bunch of mics, or maybe just a pair of mics. And all of those things, all those varying degrees are things that you'll consider in your planning process. Digital can also be video interviews that you post on your website. It can be something that goes on your YouTube channel, program notes on your phone or tickets on the phone. Digital planning documents and planning software like OPAS or ArtsVision. These are digital. They technically exist online. You can use them. You use them to plan your season. You can use them for payroll purposes. They are things you can use to share music with your musicians digitally. Not everything that's digital is a performance, but what I'm focusing on mostly today will be the digital performance. Is it worthwhile? Is it not? This is a good question to be thinking about, and I think that if your organization is just thinking about the very next performance that we're going to do, that might be one bit of digital thing that you might want to involve in this. Then if it's a big project and it's too expensive, maybe just think about the music and play the music. We're starting to get audiences back, and it's glorious. And it might not be worth it to involve too much digital, or maybe just scale it back and start with the pre-show slides or something like that. But if you're thinking about something like the next 5 years, the next 5 seasons, then you can start to add digital in sort of slowly over time, and that becomes a little bit more worthwhile, perhaps, or a little bit more budget friendly because it's spending over a certain amount of time. Maybe it's not a good idea right now, but it's something that you could start to work on. And don't try to do everything at once. Don't say, I really like what the Berlin Concert Hall is doing with Digital Concert Hall. I think we should do that now. Start small and grow. Don't try to do everything at once unless some donor is giving you $10 million or something, and then that changes things a lot. But I haven't heard of a situation like that for a long time. So yeah, don't do everything at once. How are we going to edit this? This is always a question too that I've seen not be considered until far too late in the process. So it's a bigger question than you think. How are we going to edit this? And we'll get to, there's a chicken and an egg situation with audio and video. We'll get to that in the next slide, but I'm just preempting it now with, it's a bigger question than you think. What's it going to look like, and how it and sound like, and how are we going to use it are also good questions. Once it's done, where will it live? Is it going to be on your website? Is it going to be on your YouTube channel? Is it going to be on a DVD or a storage drive somewhere on a shelf that it never sees the light of day? These are things to consider, as well as who's leading the charge. It's a very different conversation if your music director comes to you and says, I want to do digital, versus the planning committee. If the planning committee or the orchestra management says, you know what, maybe it's time we started doing digital, it's a different conversation than when the music director comes and says, all right, we're going to do digital and we're going to capture this concert and live stream it. Depending on who's running it, you've got some different things to consider there. Just looking at this poll while it's come in here, it has just ended. Reaching new audiences seems to be the biggest reason that people are doing doing digital. The next one's coming in are greater accessibility and promotion for our in-person offerings. So it sounds like people are using digital. I would think those are the right reasons to try to get to try to, I don't like to use the term remain relevant or become relevant, because I think the music that we play will always be relevant. But it's interesting to think about how digital can help grow, and perhaps down the road it does help grow the financial situation as well. We should be talking about how we talk about digital with our musicians and our board members and everyone else involved in the orchestra. And this goes back a little bit to that other costs conversation. It's a good idea to talk about what you're planning, how you're going to pull it off, and where you're going to go with a digital piece. Getting buy-in from the musicians and artistic staff is easy enough if you have a very clear vision and can show that your plan is good and will be good for the orchestra. In my experience here, I was kind of expecting more pushback on, I don't want to be on screen, I don't want to be broadcast on the internet, I don't want to be involved in digital. But what we ended up doing was we had a plan. We said, this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it. We did a lot of experimentation before. Some of it did not work at all. And once we got through the experimentation phase that we explained was experimentation, we said, all right, here's what we're good at, here's what we can do, here's what we want to do, and this is what it means for you, this is what it means for this content, and we got a lot of buy-in for that. And it was, I think that if you do it in the right way, then you can expect the same with your orchestra. You're always going to get pushback on anything that's new with an orchestra. That's the nature of it. But yeah, that's something that you can preempt and work well towards. Okay, let's see, the next thing, preparation. So plans need to happen. Personnel needs to be figured out, and musicians and artistic team need to be on board. So that's what we know needs to happen. What does that sort of mean? Like I was saying a minute ago, getting the buy-in from the musicians is important, but also having the whole team on board is important as well. We'll talk about prepping a video score in a minute. That's a very concrete example of how preparation can go. But you also have to consider who are you making this for, and where is it going to exist, and how are the musicians going to be involved in that? And that preparation is really important. Preparing a video score, when we get there in a moment, we'll talk a little bit about the equipment, understanding your equipment, and understanding how you can supplement that equipment, or what you can't do. Sometimes is more important. When we started our digital project many years ago, before the pandemic, we didn't do any live streaming here, but we did have a series called Musically Speaking. And Musically Speaking was sort of and still is intended to bring in a younger audience, and bring in an interested audience, and an audience that might be more interested in more than just listening to the music. So part of that series is we have these screens on the side of the stage that we show close-up things of what's happening on the stage, some image magnification of what's happening live. So these are, if there's an oboe solo or something, we can get right in and you can see the oboe's fingers moving, or you can see the facial expressions change on these big screens on the sides. And so when we started, we had 4 cameras. We had a switcher that could switch between them, and a camera controller that had 6 presets per camera, which was fantastic, because that meant we had 24 different shots that we could prepare in advance, which was a lot for having never done it before. And so we would prepare sort of shots of individual places, and then we'd be able to move those cameras, but the preset gets you there quickly, and then you can adjust and zoom in and zoom out, pan and tilt as well. So that was our system then, and it's had several people working on it, and we've improved it quite a bit since then. We now, in our hall, we have 6 cameras. They're nicer cameras, And we sometimes have a seventh camera, which means that we need to have more switchers and more camera control. So we can now do 50 presets per camera, which you'll see in a minute my document that I used to prepare that. But it's opened up a whole new world of we can now put a preset on every musician if we want, or almost every musician, certainly every section on each camera that they can see. So knowing the difference between those two things, if I was preparing for today's technology, but using yesterday's technology, and I said, okay, I want to have a preset for every section, we wouldn't be able to do that. So this is sort of what I mean by knowing your equipment and knowing the equipment that's walking into the room. And if you are not doing these things, being able to articulate to the person who is what that equipment's capabilities are. There's a big difference between having 6 or 7 cameras with 50 presets and having 4 cameras with 6 each. Because you need to be able to prepare, or having 2 cameras and only one moves, like that kind of thing. You can't prepare the same way. So you need to be able to explain those things. And what does buy-in look like for the orchestra? Musicians should be in favor of this. Remember, it's their performance you're recording. The audience expectations should be realistic, and they get those expectations from you. So don't tell them that that you've got artificial reality when you've got 2 cameras. The board should have an understanding of why this is important to the organization, and like we talked about a few minutes ago, there's various reasons why this could be important. But to you specifically, or your organization specifically, why is it important? The board should be aware of that and on board. Crew should be prepared, and sometimes this means hiring specialists, or at least explaining the concept to whomever is leading the crew, so that person can be sure to fill in the right people for the job that's required. And then editing. Editing is expensive, so shooting and recording full takes is a great idea. This can be a conversation with the musician. If you don't have a lot of budget for edits, they should be aware of this. All of this will take more time than you think at first, because anytime you're editing, there's a lot of files to go through. We found that file transfer was an issue. When we record a lot of things on a lot of cameras, there's a lot of data, and that goes on to several hard drives, and it gets on there slowly, and the person in charge of video at the hall has to stay a few extra hours just to transfer some of that data over. Those things are getting better, but not fast enough. I did mention a chicken and an egg situation, and so this is in the film world. We would say video is king. You can overdub a line later on. That's easy enough. You can, as long as you've got the right shot, the right moving camera, the right lighting, all of that stuff. Video is the most important. In the orchestra world, it's the other way around. Ask any of the musicians, and they'll say they listen to the music and then they watch it. They listen first, even if it's at the same time. They listen first and they watch second. Of course, they don't want to see themselves making mistakes. They don't want to see themselves making a funny face. It's pretty fun watching some of the rehearsals, because they don't hold back as much, because they know there's no audience. But audio is king in the orchestra world. So if the audio doesn't work the first take, video had better be ready for both takes, because if audio is good the first take and not the second, and video is only ready on the second take, it's not going to be usable. So video needs a lot of extra time just to prepare, to make sure that they're ready to go for every take. And like I said, having one take is preferable for editing purposes. But if you do take multiple takes of a movement or of a piece, your musicians will be expecting you to edit those little bits in and out, and that can wreak havoc on a video editor if it doesn't line up. One of the first ones that we tried to get permission to release had things that the audio had been fixed and they'd used the wrong video, and then the musicians came back and said, hold on a second, I see this happening, but I don't hear this happening. So that won't work either. And then, so what are we going to do with the video? The strategy that seems to work best is always having a wide shot available for everything. Or if you think about who's always moving, it's the conductor, always having a shot of the conductor, so that even if it's a solo section and you didn't get good video of it, you've at least got the conductor moving their hands, and you can see the eye contact that they're making. And so having that, or having a wide shot of everybody, those are good tactics, I think, when you're making these plans. So plan to have one wide shot camera that never moves or never changes, and then have all your other cameras that you are allowed to move if you do. Or at very least have something wide at any given moment for anything, and that will help save you in the editing room. All right, finally, I think we should talk about copyright just briefly. So copyright is an important thing to consider, because be careful that you're not broadcasting something without permission is sort of the first thing to say. YouTube can take care of some of these permissions for copyrighted material. If it's a monetized channel, they'll pay the rights holders for the views rather than you, which is fine, but just make sure that you're not trying to broadcast something that you don't have permission to do. And here's a fun one. Even public domain music can set off the copyright algorithm. So even if you're playing Mozart, there might be a commercial recording of that same Mozart symphony, and the algorithm might be picking it up and saying, "Oh no, this is Chicago Symphony recorded this, so this is not public domain. This is a recording of somebody else." And this can be a problem, especially during the live stream when YouTube says, "Nope, we're turning off the audio," and that's because it's not a human being who's listening and knowing that your symphony is playing something for the first time, or like a new recording of this thing. They're just scrubbing the internet and saying, "I hear that sound somewhere else, and it's under a certain label. BMI owns this," or something. So just be careful about that. There are other ways to get around this. I think JW Player is an option that you can embed on your website. And that will not have that issue, although if you don't pay your licensing fees, and they could come after you for that. So it's just a reminder to consider to pay everyone who you need to pay. Orchestra librarians know a lot about this stuff and can help sort out licensing. If you're renting music, your orchestra librarian is the one who is renting that music. They will be able to tell the publishing agent that we're also going to live stream this, or we're going to record this and have it available for 1 year or however long. So just keep that in mind, that person is a resource and probably knows, if they don't know, they know who to ask about these things. And also you can consider, this is just kind of a fun anecdote, you can consider that if you're making illegal photocopies of things, which we all do, that those are going to likely show up on the camera somewhere. So maybe be careful not to do too many of those things. But it's certainly a consideration that once you've got a digital record, that means that it's out there for other people to see, including your photocopies. Okay, so before we get into the Q&A, I'd like to give you a quick demonstration of what it is like to plan and create a score. And I won't do the live calling out loud because I want you to listen to the music, but you'll sort of be able to follow along on the score. So let me just close this window and move over here. So here we are looking at, can we still see this? Yeah, okay, good. So what we're looking at here is Mozart Symphony 41. And I've just gone through and I've kind of put some of the things that I think I want to see in here. This is my planning layer. So what we're going to see on this performance, we want to have the title slide. This is a place where it says what we're listening to. Here we like to list our musicians first as well. And then we've got a black slide that we can transition to with a one move on the switcher to the live performance. At the end, we're not going to get to this, but at the end we have a credits slide as well, actually several credit slide, just giving credit to, again, the musicians, but then also the staff and the crew involved in the show. So going back to here, this Mozart, looking at this, usually I like to start with the conductor. This is my usual go-to, is having the conductor, because everyone on the stage is watching the conductor. So it's kind of fun to start with the conductor to see what's happening. First thing after this is the strings have a little bit. So we'll, I'll just sort of circled this. I've done this quickly and messily because I'm the only person who usually sees this, so I don't worry too much about it being particularly legible. So pardon my atrocious handwriting on here. Next, we've got the flutes over here, followed by another string bit, specifically the violins this time. And then we haven't seen the horns yet. We've heard them a little bit, but this is something substantial that they've got all of a sudden. So we want to have some French horns showing here. Coming up after that, we've got more strings. And then we haven't showed the timpani yet. So before the end of the first phrase, let's see the timpani. That's sort of the plan. And then going ahead after that, we've got a bassoon solo. That's important. After the bassoon solo ends, we've got to switch off the bassoon because they're resting. And so let's get to the flute and oboe again. We've got more strings coming up after that, and then we've got a cello solo. I've written here cello 1 or bassoon 1, maybe we could pick. So we'll see later which one of those I decided. And we won't go on much farther than that. Just this is how I plan to do any given piece. So the next thing we've got to do is set up the stage. So we get a stage diagram. You'll recognize the spacing from the year 2020. So the way that worked for us was wind players needed 3 meters apart from each other. String players needed 2 meters apart. The spacing and everything is not important for this discussion. But like I mentioned earlier, we are using 7 cameras right here. So the cameras are, actually these are backwards. 1 and 3 are switched. 1 is over here, 3 is over here. 2 is still in the middle. 2 is usually our wide shot because it was looking at the entire orchestra. 4 and 6 are on opposite stage wings. 5 was sort of a wider shot that we used, and 7 is pretty much just the conductor. So those are how we set up our cameras. If you're going to use 4, just sort of think about the 4 corners. That might work. If you're using 2, have a wide shot, and then maybe have something over on a corner. If you're using 1, just have the wide shot. That works really nicely as well. Having sort of 3 is nice to have 3 out front, but I kind of like having 4 corners if possible. In the video, you'll actually see the cameras. If you look on the wings, or you'll likely see number 5 on the stage. You won't probably see too many of these ones, but you'll actually see these cameras on tripods on the stage. And we weren't trying to hide those when we did those. Let's see what's next here. So like I said, we've got 50 presets. So this is the list of presets right down the top. This is just a template that I use. So we can change these, of course, but like I said, we can now, with 50 presets, have every section of the orchestra. And then this is the cameras we're using: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't put 7 in there because it's a static shot of the conductor. So if we had flute 1 on camera 1, I would just write a 1 here. If we had flute 1 on camera 3, I'd write a 3 over here. And this is just a quick view of everything. So this is all the flutes, horns, winds, brass percussion, and strings, as well as a few extra shots, like a wide shot on. I make a wide shot on all the cameras just in case. I make a conductor shot on all the cameras just in case, because you can always jump to one of those if you get lost in the score or something. So you'll see these pink numbers coming up again in a moment on the score. So looking at that score, these are my cameras in green. My green for go. Green is go on the camera. The red is the standbys, or what's coming up. And then these pink numbers are these pink numbers here. So our first shots for each of the strings, or sorry, each of the cameras is Camera 1 is going to be on the timpani. We're going to need the timpani. You'll see why in a bit. You might remember from the score we just looked at why we want the timpani. Camera 2's first shot is going to be strings. Camera 3 is violins. 4 is cello, and I put the principal in brackets because we want to make sure it's the cello 1. 5 is conductor medium wide shot. Again, apologies for the atrocious handwriting. 6 is flute and oboe, and then 7 is our static conductor shot. Looking ahead in the score, so now I've started adding these colors in. So our first shot is a conductor medium wide shot. Our next shot is a strings shot. Remember, I circled the strings down here. So when I'm calling this, I say off the top, standby 5. Since we've set up our first shots for each of these cameras, I don't have to prep them. I can just say as soon as the conductor raises his or her arms and starts, I say go, standby 2. As the music progresses, we get to here, and I say go and standby 6. When it gets to here, go, standby 3. When it gets to here, go, get horns on 6, or get 617. And then there's a person who's controlling the camera who presses in 617, and then camera 6 jumps over to the horns. It was on the flute and oboe, so I have to wait until I say go here, and then get 617, standby 6. We're playing this part. 6 happens, standby 7. 7's the conductor. All of these pink numbers, again, are the preset numbers, just in case if I look up and I see that 7 is not on the conductor, which is impossible usually because it's a static shot, then I can say get 750, and the camera controller can get the conductor on 50. So when we get to this moment in the score, if we're standing by 7, we say go, standby 2. Next page. Here's the strings. So when we get to this moment, we say go, standby 7. At this moment, if we have time, we can prepare 5 because 5 is coming up. So if we have time, we say get 512, standby 7, and we get to here, we say go, standby 1. At this point, if we have time, get 6-3 because we are going to prepare that 6th camera. And then here we are, the timpani, go. So now we've got the timpani on the screen, standby 2, timpani finishes, go, get 5, get 512, this is 5 bassoon. If we didn't prepare it here, we'll prepare it now. Get 512, standby 5. We get here, go, get 6-3. 6, if we didn't prepare it earlier, we'll prepare it here. Standby 6 and go, standby 3, and violins, standby 7, standby 4, and saying go for each of those. And then we're at the cello solo, and that's as far as we're going to get to right now. So I will play the music, starting with our slides that we mentioned earlier, and I'll move this along with the music. I'll try to keep up, and I will shut up for a second and let you hear the music and watch all these things happen as we go. All right, here we go.
Alex, I don't think we're hearing the sound on the video. We're seeing it, but not hearing it.
It should start with this coming up. Once they start playing, if you don't hear it, let me know.
Oh, here we go.
And that's as far as we needed to get, I think. So I will, oh, actually, maybe instead of that, I'll go back and, yeah, I guess I don't need to share my screen anymore. The last slide was Q&A. So I hope you got to see all of that and hear that okay. I think it's time for the third poll and the Q&A portion of the presentation. So Lauren, that's I'm going to put the third poll up there now.
Sure, we'll do the third poll quickly, and then we'll get into some of the questions that have come up.
So what makes a digital orchestra performance stand out to you? This is a nice question. Maybe all of the above or something else.
We'll just give this like maybe 15 seconds for folks to respond.
Sure.
And then we'll get into some of the questions.
Oh, I'm a little sad that we're having, it looks like the creators had fun with it. It's not higher up, although that should probably be expected.
Depends on the project.
Somebody just added to it just for me, I think.
Okay, so we're watching the results come in. Just a couple more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna end it and share. All right, so hopefully you're seeing on the screen, we've got excellent sound, interesting camera work and visuals at the top, and a great program. And it looks like the creators had fun with it. All right, thanks everybody. So Alex, there's been some chatter in the chat just about a few different things, but something that came up is kind of the difference between a larger budget and a smaller budget context. So in the summer, as part of Resilient Ontario Orchestras, you worked with 2 smaller budget orchestras. A lot of the folks on this call are potentially almost entirely volunteer run. Maybe they have 1 staff member and a music director. What was some of the key advice that you gave to your smaller budget orchestras that you were working with? And what are some of the key differences that you would translate between larger budget to smaller budget in terms of what you talked about?
Thinking about maybe the biggest one was for a smaller budget group, knowing what you've got to work with, knowing what your hall has and what the capabilities of those staff are without going above that. So asking about what can we do, what information or sorry, what equipment do you have, and how can we use that without adding too much cost is sort of the first thing, and hopefully that will be enough. Like if they say, well, we've got a couple of cameras in the hall, we've got a bunch of microphones, you're welcome to use it. It'll cost a little bit extra to set up and stuff, but you're welcome to use that. Planning around what's already there, and then making those tiny or strategic investments in a better pair of microphones or 2 cameras or whatever. Like starting small is sort of for a smaller budget. That's the first thing, is finding out what you've got available and what kind of expertise you have. If you go into your hall and they say we don't have anyone who does video, then you need to maybe reassess what you want to do for that. For a larger budget orchestra, it might be more of a, okay, what do we want to do, and then who do we have to bring in for that? So it goes the other direction. The smaller budget says, what have we got and what can we do? And the larger budget is, what do we want to do and what is it going to take? So I think those are the sort of 2 different mindsets that you can start with. And you can, if you can get a grant, then you can start to think of the bigger mindset. If you can get a big donation or a sponsorship for one of these things, then you can think of the bigger budget. But I'd say that was sort of the thing that I discovered fairly early on about how a smaller budget orchestra works compared to a larger budget orchestra.
Thanks, Alex. We got a question earlier from Ben about thoughts on editing and fake applause. There's been some chatter in there, but wondering if you had a thought on that, or any of the other kind of editing that goes into replicate something live in a digital.
Yeah, I don't know if we made the right call on that. We put in some fake applause a few times. The thing is, the orchestra's natural response at the end of a piece is to stand up and take a bow. And it was really weird to see that and not hear anything. So, but I don't know if that was the right call. It might have been a better idea to have a different way to end the piece when there's no audience in the house. The thing is that the music director or the conductor involved will probably want to point out some particular members for solos and stuff, and acknowledge them. And so sort of by the end, we started to, encourage the orchestra to think of it as like congratulating your colleagues on it, like, oh yeah, that was good, and we really wanted them to be like, oh, I heard you play that thing and it was great. They didn't really jump on board with that, but if you if you can have some kind of organic thing without an audience, but having a way to acknowledge those people at the end. I don't love the fake applause, but I think it might be better than dead silence. So that's what I'd say about that.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, and it's interesting, the question of like designing for digital versus designing for in-person, and kind of the value that each bring. I'm going to bring Catherine back up on the screen here. I noticed there was also some chatter about copyright challenges on YouTube and Facebook. Alex, have you ever had a situation where that's happened in your role, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, so we did have one example where it went down during the stream, or it went down during a presentation. It wasn't the full orchestra. It was a smaller. There's a quartet or something, and it was really weird, and we didn't know what was going on, and we it took a long time for us to get that back up, but we were eventually able to do that, and I don't think we have got any copyright strikes against us, which is a thing that YouTube does. And eventually, after a certain number of strikes or a certain volume in a shorter period of time, they cancel your YouTube channel. I don't think we haven't had too many of those.
I'm going to leap in here and say, Alex, that in fact, the first weekend of the pandemic was rapid learning time for the Vancouver Symphony, Philadelphia Orchestra, and I think Windsor as well. I'm just sort of thinking we're talking about 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th of March of 2020. And in fact, what we discovered was that people were announcing live streams, kind of spontaneously organized live streams. And around concert time, you'd have to figure out which platform it was actually going to be running on, because so many were trying to do something at the last minute and then getting a copyright challenge and not knowing how best to address it. And basically the message that came there was acknowledge that there are copyright challenge potentials, even with, in some cases, especially with public domain repertoire, simply because somebody else has recorded it before you, and it's not the repertoire, it's a previous recording, as you mentioned. But it does seem that YouTube kind of smartened up a bit in terms of, they tell you there's a challenge, you respond to it immediately, and it gets escalated to the point where you're actually talking with a person, and you can usually work it out, but it's not the kind of thing that can be done mid-concert.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
And so that's just one of those things where preparation really comes in handy, as does looking at other strategies than YouTube to be dealing with. So just to throw that one out there, there was a lot of spontaneous and frantic texting at the last minute. I'm recalling from that weekend. And
yeah,
indeed, it is bots dealing with it, as Devin has pointed out. And the point is, you need to escalate it immediately so that you get to a person. The only way that YouTube, Facebook, etc., can deal with the volume of content that's being posted is through some kind of bot filter. And it's, as I say, escalating legitimate concerns to the point where you reach a person eventually. But you know all about this, Alex, because you work in the library as well as all the other things that you've been up to. So,
to be fair, most of my role was the on the ground creating of it, and not the back end, what's happening on YouTube part of it. I saw some of that happening, but I'm glad to hear your advice and your experience about that.
Yeah, as I say, it was just something where I think everybody had a very steep learning curve. Because we went from being able to welcome people into the hall and digital as a frill to not being able to welcome people into the hall, and digital became an essential way of keeping musicians playing under whatever conditions and staying in close contact with existing and potential audiences. I see another question that came into the chat. Did audiences stay to the end of your concert presentations online? How are you measuring audience engagement for your online activity?
I never asked that question. That's a good question. The numbers I heard about were where this many people were watching at once, or this many people. We think this many people watched the live stream, but I would expect that people would stay to at least to the end of the music. They might turn it off when we get to the credit slides, but um, yeah, I'm not actually sure about how many people that would
I
have
think the
been.
folks in your marketing department actually do keep an eye on that level of
They
engagement.
definitely know. Yeah.
But this is more on the content capture and the considerations for content capture. So, Devin, we may have to engage in a conversation with somebody else at the VSO to track those insights. Lauren, is there anything else that came in?
So I think those are all the questions that came in. Thank you so much, Alex, for your presentation. Really appreciate the, learning more about what you need to know before you engage in digital. I think even though a lot of folks have started to, it's helpful to have a refresher. And as we all are kind of pondering the role of digital post-pandemic, what does it require and what do we get out of it? This was really helpful for kind of learning about that.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
just going to reflect on one other thing before we let Alex go, and that is one of my favorite, extremely short videos was made by the musicians of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. In fact, it was the clarinets and the bassoons. I think they were playing the overture to Ruslan and Ludmilla, and they had their iPhones on their stands, and they were passing licks back and forth. That's written into the piece, and they basically took what they had each filmed and edited it together into a truly heart-stopping 20-second video clip of things being passed back and forth within the section. And honestly, if anything gave me a sense of the vibrancy and the excitement of people making music together, something that cheap and cheesy did so brilliantly. So I think that it's possible to make art on a low budget and on a high budget, and all points in between. So
I hope you can send that to me, Catherine. I'd love to see that. And also, before I go, I just want to thank you and Lauren. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the opportunity to present this stuff. I really appreciate it, and it's
much
nice to see
appreciated.
people here to see this as well. So thank
Absolutely.
you,
And
everybody.
great. Thank you, Alex. And a reminder to everyone, we've got 2 more sessions in our Festival of Learning. December 1st, Natasha Bood and Orchestra Kingston will be talking about volunteer recruitment. And on December 8th, our special surprise section is featuring Jamie Gamble, who is an expert on evaluation. And Jamie is our embedded evaluator for the Resilient Ontario Orchestras project. And he'll talk about program evaluation, and we'll share some of what we're learning through our work with him and with you. So looking forward to it. See you next week. Please fill out the post-event survey. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.